Okay, so good evening, everybody, and good morning to New York. This is we are very happy today with the BNC Club to organize this with Cora Sheibani. We have been talking about organizing visits, and then it became a Zoom, and on the theme of color. Because I've met Cora when I arrived in London. That was already 7 years ago. She was one of the first person that I have met through a common friend. And which has really struck me with Cora is that her very strong relationship with color and the way she wears it. First, that's what I saw. And then going to her house, discovering her jewelry, that was sort of a shock. And I said, "This is, you don't realize, Cora, that you're living with all these different colors." And of course, we've been talking about her family history and about our common love for Ettore Sottsass. I was a former curator of the exhibition of Ettore Sottsass at the Centre Pompidou, which was in 1997, and I've worked like 2 years on this artist and about this amazing installation that he made at the Pompidou. And then when I discovered that Cora's father was, has represented Ettore, and that Cora has known him as a little girl and a teenager, and being very, very so much influenced by the Alchemia period and also the rainbow connection. He always wanted to have people connected with color. And so I realized that this influence was really deep in her heritage and in her DNA. And then she said, "But what should I say about color?" And now, so I'm really sorry, Cora, I made you work so much. You've made this fantastic presentation. And we will all discover, which I've in a sort of intuitively known, that you're deep intellectual. You really think much about what you do. You have a fantastic way of presenting your jewelry, the pictures with here, as we can see, with your hands and your nails. And there is always a very strong combination, and that has been taught to you by art and by a very strict sort of education of equilibrism on color and shapes as well. But also you have a very important and very intense world of yourself, and this connection you have with your kitchen molds and with the plants and with everything you have around you that you transform into art is absolutely amazing. So let's hear you now talk about this theme.
Perfect. Well, Anne-Pierre, thank you for having me, and thank you for everybody who's come to listen to my talk about color. Like Anne-Pierre said, I'm a jewelry designer based in London, and it's true, I adore color. Unlike in this photo, I actually rarely wear black. I'm usually asked by Anne, who's works with me, is there something wrong if I wear black? Because naturally I'm always drawn to color. So when Anne-Pierre asked me about a year ago, would I talk about color? I thought, oh, color, I love color, sure. And I went off and bought lots of books thinking, color, this is great. What am I going to speak about? And the more and more I read about color, the more I realized I really actually know very little about color. I have color around, but I knew very little. And then I gave Anne-Pierre a call at some point during lockdown saying, originally we were scheduled, I don't know, for the talking in April, then it got shifted to May and on and on. And I said, but Anne-Pierre, listen, I don't think I really know very much about color. And she said, no, Cora, it's about you and your love for color. And so I thought, okay, that's much more mundane. But actually, even though it's mundane, it made me think very much about, why do I like color? and how come I use it so much. And so that's kind of where the journey began. And I had to look back, and of course I grew up around lots of arts by the likes of Julian Schnabel, Francesco Clemente, Peter Halley, all artists from the 80s who use a lot of color. And I grew up around art. My father's an art dealer, and all about color. And I remember also, you know, as a child, having auction catalogs of art were, you know, a part of my kitchen, our kitchen table. I don't remember our kitchen table ever not having an auction catalog pile on it. And when I was little, Joseph Albers, there must have been at least 3 to 5 Albers in every single auction catalog of my childhood. It was the most common artist for sale. And of course, he all explored color and how one color juxtaposition to the other color, you know, how that it's color is really also about a relationship of colors next to each other. And so this world of artists and being around artists, this is my father with 3 of the artists he represented, and me as a child in an exhibition that my father hosted, you know, commissioned Andy Warhol to do. He was fed up of having us children needing to go up to look at artwork and always having to raise us to look at artwork. He thought, you know, now I'm going to make adults look down at artwork too. And so he thought, you know, if he asked Andy Warhol to make some paintings for this exhibition, then the other artists that he represents would follow suit. But Andy loved the idea and made the entire exhibition for him, at which point, even though this is a black and white photograph, it was a very colorful exhibition. And this is kind of the color world that I grew up in, not only with art, but like Anne-Pierre said, design, and everything in my world was important. I grew up in a world where it mattered what shoes you wear, who designed your tap, and everything in your life was important design. And so this, actually the fun part of this talk has been to kind of reconstruct my childhood bedroom. And so when I graduated, I guess my brother moved out. I no longer got a bunk bed, and rather than buy furniture, my father, within reason, allowed me to choose a bit what I could borrow for my bedroom. And so I chose this. My father done an exhibition just shortly before then about cupboards by Ettore Sottsass, and this was the only one that had drawers, which I thought, how in the world could you have a closet with no drawers? So I decided to choose this one, and underneath in the little hollow I put the Tahiti lamp as my bedside reading lamp. I had this enormous desk with a chair that looks incredibly uncomfortable, but was actually, in fact, very good for sitting and working at. And then the Beverly sideboard, because it was great and colorful, and it was very happy. And Sottsass was very much, or Memphis was all about an amalgamy of, rather than making everything fit purposefully, it was very influenced, I guess, by, you know, a third world country. So every time you had a bit more money and you could do a bit in addition to your house, rather than making it look integrated, it was the addition was a separate element in its own right. And that kind of construct could be a great thing. One of the best things about this room, and shows, will tell you a lot about how much I appreciate color, is that I had this Andy Warhol painting above my bed as a child, and the Beverly sideboard has a red light bulb on it. And if I turned off all the lights in my room and I turned on the red light bulb, the painting became pink. And yellow as a child was my favorite color, but pink was a close second. And I really quite enjoyed being able to change the color of the painting in my room quite easily. And these are some photos of my house today. I have to admit, maybe with a filter, the colors are slightly more vibrant in the middle than they are in real life, but I do have a yellow door. I have a bright orange chairs and a green kitchen, and we still have some Memphis furniture in our house that's in my son's bedroom. And I guess intrinsically, I'm very much drawn to color. And I think in England, where we have short days in the winter and it can be quite dreary, I think there's a long history, even more so than in Switzerland, of color being a very important part of the home.
Yes, and we can see also that for most of the people, a big piece of furniture by Alchemia, like this piece that's in your son's room, I have the feeling, could be enough. But you have decided to paint the wall or your kitchen. It's totally green, and then you have orange chairs, and then also when you're thinking of lighting, then you call Paola Petrobelli, and you chose to combine her fantastic tubed colors, lights and pendants that you have and you add in your home. So for you, it's so natural, and it's more than that. It's you're attracted, and you need it. You need it to feel joy, probably.
I probably need color more than most. I'm making this talk has made me realize that I really need color. Although I quite like wearing gray, and this is the other thing, is I love color, but I also love the absence of color. So although I really like color, if you're not going to have color, then you've got to go really minimalist. Then it's going to be like stark white or gray. And I did actually a collection inspired by clouds, and it virtually has no color. So either it's going to be all the way or not at all. I rarely do the cream beige kind of look. But there's a time for everything. And this shows me a bit that although I'm attracted, like you said, very much to color in my life, shape and contrast are very important to me. So the mundane of the blocks that they repaved Holland Park with, and the blocks, I'm very, they were such beautifully carved cubes of stones. They made me think of an artwork, how they were placed randomly there on my morning walk. I went to buy new mugs for my house. I decided to pick one in every color. And when a saucer shattered, I really like the color of this old-fashioned teacup, but the way that it shattered and making it look great for an Instagram shot was important. And all of these things are very important to me. How you see the color in contrast to other things. On the left are some watercolors that I made, and again, it's about colors, but also the contrast of the shape with the color I like. And again, this is a waste paper basket in my parents' guest bathroom, and it's very simple, but the shape, it's all about the shape and intricacy of all these different shapes to make it. Or this egg carton box where they use the holes of the shape to make eyes. And actually originally, before making jewelry, I was very interested in packaging. Mm-hmm. And again, packaging is very much about the shape. It's a graphic design on a 3-dimensional level. So this kind of shows you that, made me realize it's something I've always liked. Now for a slightly more scientific side that I felt was very important. We can talk about color in many levels, but I think if we don't talk about the science, we don't fundamentally understand why we see color and why we might like certain colors more than others. Mm-hmm. So Isaac Newton, it was a lockdown discovery, and he was self-isolating during the plague. And during that time, he had the time to think and discovered that, if you took white light and were able with a spectrum, able to break it up, it produced all the colors of the rainbow. And this made me realize our perception of color the most I read about during my research on color was the history of color. And that actually names and history of color is a very modern construct, especially blues and greens are names that we do not, in the ancient times, there are no names for blue and green in ancient Greek or in Latin. Because we always talked about depth and tonality, or the color as, it was more like, nature. You use the word nature rather than the abstract word green to define green. And the same thing is with blue. Red, on the other hand, is the earliest color we denote, and is also humans see red, is the first color they see after they see black and white. Now, interestingly enough, I, as a person that grew up with art and paint and pigment, you think the primary colors are red, yellow, and blue. And you can see these two circles. There's two circles, but the center of one is white and the center of the other is black. And that is because the way that we perceive light and that light, not perceive color, is really quite different when we talk about color in terms of light wave, and we talk about color in terms of pigments and paint, which is opaque. And as we all know, when we mix all the paint colors together, we get black. And as we know from Isaac Newton, if we mix all the rays of colors together, we get white. And so as a result, what is actually considered a primary color in how we see light is very different, or not how we see it is probably the same, but how we can create colors is quite different when we talk about creating colors of light, like on our computer screen, versus how we create color on our printer, which is a pigment. So as when we were doing the Zoom talk on one of the slides, I wanted a bluish gray or a purplish gray, and reality is a computer screen cannot very well, it's very hard to do subtle colors, especially in the gray tones, because the way that light is perceived, colors perceived with light versus pigments. As all of you will know, a printer and a screen never match up. And this is the fundamental reason why. And just to say here it gives you a bit of a sense of the different wavelengths that exist and how the different parts of the eye can ascertain different colors. And as you can see, the color that is most covered under these loops is green, and it's probably the color that our human eye is able to perceive the most of. And this comes to me to, excuse the slightly blurry image on the left, this comes to me about, you know, how what is really important, this idea of depth and tone, which really in ancient time, color was all about depth and tone, and not the abstract name of the color was important, but the feeling, the tonality, the subtlety of it. And actually in our eyes, it is the rods in our eyes that can perceive the subtlety we use to see things in the dark, and we use to discern different shades, subtle shades of color. And this is a very powerful. And so when we look at artwork like that, it is mainly the rods in our eyes that are being used to perceive this kind of artwork, the Rothko Chapel in Houston, which I've unfortunately never seen in real life. And here on the other hand, we have James Turrell, which is an artist that basically frames the sky and light as an artwork or as something to perceive. It's a you know, he doesn't paint per se. It's actually we're looking at light, and of course the way he frames it, and it's the contrast of the light around it that actually, you know, the way that you see the sky is very much influenced by the color next to it. And actually he always puts lighting inside his rooms. They're not just white spaces, to create that that contrast at sunset and sunrise. So it is still quite curated, even though it's just a space of the sky. And here, to perceive light, our eyes use only the cones in our eyes. So the cones is what we mainly use in the back of our eyes to perceive color and things in the daylight. Of course, the subtleties, we need the rods, and it's a big interplay. And actually, in the 1990s, they discovered that we actually have a third type of cell at the back of our eyes, and they're called mammalian photoreceptor cells. And they have nothing to do with really, they are related to our circadian rhythm, you know, light and our sleep rhythm, as well as our reflexes, our pupil reflexes, which is also determines our flight or flight mode. So they've got a much more deeper psychological impact on humans.
Do you think you have been influenced by James Turrell somehow, or?
I think everything I've been exposed to has influenced me. And I think the reality is, you know, I once went to an art exhibition, and I think on a subconscious level, every single thing I've been exposed to allows me to think about things. But I think I've seen quite a lot of things. I think it's at this level, at this point, rather subconscious. And I only thought of James Turrell quite late in this presentation, but it really makes sense, I think, when we talk about, you know, opaque and the light. And this kind of brings me to the next page, is that actually gemstones we have, I think, are one of the earliest places humans have seen color, because, you know, dyes, we had to discover things to get dyes, and pigments too. We ground up stones and earth, but I think what attracted humans very early on to stones was color. So I think it's one place that it is often the amazing colors of these stones is why we found them precious. Of course, some of them are very hard, like a diamond can sparkle like the rainbow, as well as being very tough and scratch anything. But I think generally it's the amazing colors, and the colors that last. You know, and earth is beautiful red earth, but it crumbles. So this is a color you can capture and keep. But what's interesting is, so gemstones, where is gemstone a pigment or is gemstone light? And I think in gemstones we have both. One of the amazing things about certain gemstones, they have a quality called pleochromism. And that means that depending on the angle at which the light goes through the gemstone, it absorbs different color lengths, and some of them, and the ones that it doesn't absorb, reflect back at us. So here the most obvious is this gem on the left. It's the same crystal you see in every photo, but depending on the angle you look at the gemstone, you have either violet, blue, or brown. And this means that when you cut a gemstone, so at the bottom is a diamond, you know, when you cut a gemstone and then light comes in and then reflects out, if you have this, if pleochromism, that means what the things that reflect back at you are slightly different colors. Mm-hmm. And so tourmalines and sapphires and rubies have this pleochromism, as well as tanzanite, more extreme. So if you cut a gemstone in the right way, you will see multiple colors or tones in the same thing. So it's one of the things you use to identify a gemstone, but you will get this play of different color. And so I think certain gemstones, like a tourmaline, is actually maybe a richer gemstone than something like a beryl, like an aquamarine or an emerald, which no matter how you look at the gemstone exhibits one color, which a lot of people aren't always quite aware of. So here we're going to start with lots of colors, and most people wouldn't consider brown a color worthy of talking about.
Yeah, is brown your favorite color? That was the question.
At the moment it is. And I actually was talking to a friend over lunch, and she said, oh, it's been like 2-3 years, hasn't it already, Cora, that brown is your favorite color? And I said, yeah, I think it probably has. And I really do like, I think brown diamonds are probably my favorite color, diamonds. And tourmalines, the ones that go into the brown tones, are definitely my favorite. And I think with both is because they have, brown is usually a mixture of different tones. You know, it's one of those colors you get with pigments before you hit black. And so it is often a mixture of oranges and reds and other colors. And so I feel it has a very rich tone to it. You know, copper is a kind of reddish brown or brownish red. Again, it's a very subjective color. You know, this in the ice cream ring, one of the stones I would consider orangish brown, because once you put it next to an orange stone, it looks really brown, or a red stone, it looks really brown. Here it might look rather orange. And maybe that's exactly what I like about it. It's very diverse. It has a very rich, but it is probably the #1 color that least people like. Almost.
Yes, it's very, and here again, it's very unusual, because as you are surrounded with color everywhere in your house, in your life, in your clothes, to be attracted to brown, which is the color that everybody sort of use on a natural way in terms of,
but the hide or one is to wear a brown sweater, but then you can wear one color at the top and another color at the bottom, and it can be very diverse. So one of my favorite stones is this color, like I'm wearing today. You probably can hardly see. is jasper, which is this red brick colored stone, but it's all about how you combine it with other colors. And of course, yellow was always one of my favorite colors. And so in a way, I combine almost all stones with gold or yellow. I think I probably like gold because I like the color yellow. And so they kind of semi go hand in hand. And although a lot of jewelers that really care more about design than value actually usually almost always go away from using gold. But I think it's my love of yellow that has made me always still like the color of yellow gold. This is kind of the beginning. And then we have orange. Orange in a way is just a slightly more feminine version of brown, or a more feminine version of red. Of course, it depends how you see it. And it has far less negative connotations than either sometimes red can have in modern day, or even yellow, or even yellow. It's quite energetic. My husband's favorite color is orange, and again, I really like it because orange is again quite similar to brown, so it's a color. And here, some of the stones again are tourmalines because I feel these are incredibly rich stones. And here, of course, in a photo, you only see one tone, but as soon as you have them in real life, they exhibit multiple colorations. And then yellow, here again, our computer let us down. It was impossible to get the right shade of blue to be the text because white didn't work. But it's an optimistic, cheerful color. Having said that, historically, it was rather unpopular. It's, with black, I didn't want to write black text because then you think of warning signs and stop and during the war, it was used to denote Jews and the yellow star. I mean, it has some terrible connotations historically. Having said that, it was one of the hardest colors to dye. So in China, in ancient times, it was reserved only for the elite. And it's a very funner color. I think a lot of people find yellow very hard to wear. And after brown, it is one of actually the least popular colors among the general demographic today in the West. But like I said, I quite, it's a cheerful color.
And the stones are a bit more fragile when they are yellow as well, or not?
It's funny. So on the left we have citrine mixed with jasper again. This brick color stone that I like, and I thought citrine is just a yellow color quartz. So it's the same family as rock crystal, smoky quartz, amethyst, citrine are all the same family, but apparently the yellow is more fragile than the purple and the gray. For setting, it does chip a little bit more, which I wasn't aware of until about a week ago.
Yeah.
But actually the bottom stones here are yellow beryl. There's a set of rings. It's a pair, and they have a cat's eye. That means inside it, very, very finely, they have parallel crystals running inside it, but they're so small that it gives the entire stone a milky look. But when you cut it in this oval way and you shine light on it, it gives this straight line, like an eye, which you see like a cat's eye, like these slits of white, which are great fun. And eyes again come in pairs, so I've made pairs of rings. Then red is a very interesting color. Today I was invited to a breakfast election, and there, the Republicans and Trump was the red states, and the Democrats were blue, and the people on the screen were either wearing blue, red, and red. There was a lady who literally was wearing a necklace, and the blue beads here, and the red beads here, and the red jacket, and the blue top underneath. She was very bipartisan, and it was a very interesting talk. And the person who hosted me said, "Yeah, if I want to be quite forceful and dominate my meeting, I'll wear a red tie, and if I want to be more gentle and friendly, I'll wear blue." So
that's interesting.
Of course, I'm not quite as old as him, and I'm not so self-conscious every time I get dressed of the thing I'm portraying. I more think about myself and how I feel. So when I get dressed, I think less about how I will how other people will perceive me than how it makes me feel myself.
Mhm.
And so this is not maybe always healthy, but I feel, I think if you're happy in yourself and confident in yourself, then hopefully you project the right thing to other people. So I wear jewelry that I like to wear, not what I think other people think I should wear or what I should choose to wear, but what actually makes me happy. And so maybe that's why I'm happy to wear color. I'm not worried about what other people are going to say about my look. I care more about myself personally and how it makes me feel.
Mhm. Mhm.
And anyway, I grew up with a mother who says, you know, who wants to be normal? Who wants to look like everybody else anyway? It's not.
Yeah. By the way, how does she dress? Does she dress very colorful or very differently?
I think my mother uses a lot of color, and there are phases where she wore a lot of gray. I think we all in life
Uh-huh.
have different phases. But you know, my mother loves color.
Oh, that's good.
Both
That's
my
good.
parents and
But
both
because
my
yeah.
parents love color, which is why red
Ah.
is always my father's favorite color. But what is red is really quite different. I mean, for my father, red is Ferrari red. In the gemological world, a Ferrari is reddish orange. And even the screen, how I see it in gemological terms, would be considered orange. And so in a gemstone, this kind of orange means it has iron in it, and so it's quite different than a ruby that generally, if it is the brightest color and most dynamic and most expensive, cannot have iron and be on the orange spectrum. So it's a very, I think it's, again, color is very subjective and it's very abstract thing. And red for us has this, you know, dynamic, dominant perspective in the West, whereas in the East, it's about prosperity. It's the, you know, you wear it for your wedding. And I think in Europe, what I came to realize, we have a lot of puritanical ideas when it comes to color. So we wear white as a wedding because it's a very puritanical issue, and most objects were and color was not considered proper. You know, this is why Henry Ford refused to make a colored car. He made them all black because he felt it was the sober and correct thing to do. And so for a long time, wearing color was considered a kind of avant-garde and being a bit wild, whereas actually being, you know, there's this whole idea, this puritanical idea that color is not good. So all objects should be, if they're very good to use, should be gray and white and beige and brown, because a wood by definition was used a lot, but color.
So yeah, so it's definitely the society that had made us a bit intimidated by color,
But in
and religious as well.
but
No,
I think it has to do with that.
puritanity.
But also for many years, there were laws, they're called sumptuary laws, that as said who was allowed to wear certain colors. So certain colors like purple, you know, was reserved for emperors, partly because it was very expensive, but also they wanted to show they could afford it and they had the power to wear it. But even much later, certain colors in many societies were reserved for certain people. And so I think that's where it comes from. The reason we have white tablecloths is because you could boil them, and so it showed that you could be clean. So lots of, I think many colors have developed over very practical, mundane reasons. And red, again, red has become a very dynamic color because it makes our blood pressure increase. They've showed people red, and it affects you on a very physical level. So this brings me to the next thing, red and pink. In the world of gemology, there's one question that has always kind of baffled me, and it is that a ruby technically is red, but as soon as a ruby becomes too pink, it's a sapphire, a pink sapphire. And this might, for many people, think, oh, what's really the difference? You know, it's quite obvious what's the difference on the screen. But actually, many gems in the past, there are many pieces of jewelry that are sold as rubies and today would be classified as pink sapphires. And of course, the name makes a big difference on price. And it's a very it's a very subjective situation, which also led me to the idea that why rubies are probably one of the most rare gemstones, and because ruby is a very liked color in Asia, it's one of the most liked color. It demands very high prices, far beyond diamonds. And rubies are considered, more precious if they have no iron in them, so no orange, and fluoresce. And yet diamonds, as soon as they fluoresce, are considered less valuable. And so there's this whole world, in my world, of color, where different colors and different influences are quite important when it comes to value and naming, which I think are quite arbitrary and have shifted, even in 100 years. The naming of stones due to their color is not very static, and is a subjective, dynamic situation. And this brings us to blue, which today is the color that most people like the most. In ancient Rome, it was the color of barbarians, because I think there was some tribes in Northern Europe that painted themselves blue, and it was not easy to dye. It was the colors, indigo was this color that came from far away. And so it was a color that had no name. Some people even thought maybe they couldn't see blue, but I think it's just blue was not something that was important in their life. And yet today it's considered the color that is a cool color and relaxing. This idea of hot and cold colors is a bit subjective. I think what we do know about blue is that it decreases our blood pressure because it's opposed to red. The way our eyes perceive it, the wavelengths physically make us more calm.
Yeah, and maybe the ocean and the sky makes us calm nature.
Yeah. So and the photo here in the middle is all a photo of fluorescent diamonds on the back of a bracelet that I made. So here we've got turquoise, lapis, chalcedony, sapphires, all blue. And then we get purple, which is a mixture of red and blue. So it can be quite unsettling, because in our eyes, it's a mixture of some shades of red and some shades of blue. And like I said, to dye this was immensely complicated. And so it was really always reserved for emperors. And as a result, it has this connotation of power. And funnily enough, about 150 years ago, amethyst, the most common purple color in gems, was so rare it was more precious than a diamond. Funnily enough, today it is probably the gemstone you can get most readily, most consistently in any color. And so actually the way that purple in the jewelry industry is perceived today is probably the opposite of the past.
Mm-hmm. And are all these gems? I mean, if you talk about the material, is there ones that you find it easier working with?
So green.
The green,
definitely.
Oh, good. That's a good introduction then.
So partly because I think there are probably more gemstones in the tonalities of green than anything else. Mm-hmm. And possibly is because we also perceive more shades of green. So it could be that, so we can distinguish between more shades of green than we can do of shades of red. And so as a result, I think there are just a lot more choice green. So the ice cream ring here on the left is our one is the light one is a green opal. The other one is chrysoprase, which is a microcrystalline quartz from Australia. Then we have amazonite earrings with malachite. The mask ring are tsavorite, it's a stone from Tanzania. And then here again, malachite and chrysoprase. And finally, the brooch on the right is a tourmaline. There are so many different colors. And another thing that I like is the opaque and the clear. I love that combination of the of using gemstones of both nature. Mm-hmm. And like you said, blue is tranquil. I think green is another color of tranquility, of nature. in some ways it was naivety, but it's again, like blue, it's not a color in the abstract sense of the name green is again a rather modern construct. You know, naming of colors is an abstract concept and a modern construct in many ways.
It's the color of hope as well, I think, no?
And the reality is we think of these things, but literally they change from decade to decade, century to century. Our perception of colors is very, very different. And things like today, the idea that the Republicans are the reds and the Democrats are blue, I think is something that's only about 20 years old, literally. And it's something that we take for granted, but it's not more than 20 years old. And I like the combination of colors. You know, here we talk about every color on its own, but I like lots of colors. And this is a funny photo. This is me and my family. And if you won't believe it, we all got dressed independently that day. We went to visit my daughter in boarding school when she just started. And here she was wearing a yellow t-shirt, my husband a darker yellow. I was wearing orange and my boy's blue. And but it very much tells you about you know, who we are, and that we all very much like.
They grew up in this house that's so joyful.
Yeah, and my son, who's now 15, my older son, he said today, you know, this weekend actually, he only just became aware that how much art and color we have around the house, and he, you know, he never really thought anything else of it, and only realized how colorful it really was compared to most homes. Very recently. Or even my youngest son today in bed, he said, "Who made that painting?" You know, it's a world that I don't know. I can't imagine anything else. But the reality is, I'm a visual person. You know, I'm moved by color and vision. For me, poetry is very abstract. If someone reads me poetry, I have to read it 5 times for me to make a visual picture in color, to be able to appreciate those words. So for me, everything written or songs, to be really appreciated fully, I form a picture.
And so, what would you say to everybody that has joined us today on their use of color? How to in a way change the way you perceive it, and what would be your message?
I think a lot of people, you know, one thing is I read a beautiful book called The Victorian House, and it was about how the Victorians arranged their house, why they rather have a house that was small and narrow on their own rather than an apartment. You know, why did the British have a house and the French like an apartment? And it's because they, you know, my house is my castle, it's my domain, it's where I can be my own boss. And there it was always said, you know, you should match the walls of the sitting room to match the lady of the house. You know, so if you have light eyes, it's very easy. You make them bluish or greenish or things, and you match them to the coloring of the lady of the house. And that's a great way to start using color. But it also depends. If you live in a very light country that has light all year round, then maybe you feel like your house needs less color because your world around you is always filled with color. So you want a more calming situation. But actually, I read a lot, white is a very uncalming color and a very unrelaxing color. So I think people need to, whenever people choose a color for the wall, once you decide you like a certain color, go for about 2-3 shades lighter, because as soon as you put it out, it looks different. And I think people worry about what other people think about them. And I think people should just, you know, see colors they like and go for them, and not worry too much about what other people will say.
Yeah. Would you have some recommendations on books that you've been reading that are, you know, that source of influence and reflection?
So I'm reading this book, which is a great book. It's one of the main scholars. And actually, when I first read out books about color, friends of mine on Instagram said, "Oh, but you have to read this author," and it is true. Michel Pastoureau is a great scholar. He's in the Sorbonne. He teaches at the Sorbonne and doing research on color and color. You know, not just about color theory, but about the history of color. For over 30 years. This is a more personal reflection. I also have his 5 books, which he wrote on individual colors and their history, originally published in French, but also exist in English with, is it Princeton or Yale University Press? You can get them all on Amazon. I thought, okay, that many books, do I really need them? I'll buy 1 or 2. And then when I opened them, started reading them, I said, oh, this is so great, I've got to buy them all. And they look a bit thin and flimsy, and so you think they're like not very academic or not very serious, but because of course it's a book that requires pictures to read and to enjoy, it's in this rather funny format of not being a coffee book and not being a reading book. It's this thing in between, but quite accessible. And I think his writing
and on another subject, I've been told, and you have to tell me what you think, that one should wear gold in the summer and silver in the winter. Have you ever heard that?
I've never heard that.
You never heard that, because gold would be better on a very tanned skin, and in the winter, the silver is attracting maybe more light. I don't know.
I don't know. I kind of think the opposite.
You think the opposite? Okay.
Well, and funny enough, when I first started making jewelry in the 90s, everybody wore white gold. It was the fashion to have white gold, wedding band and white and everything white. And I'm so pale that white made me feel very pale and washed out. Mm-hmm. And so silver and white was never my thing, because I just thought it was too cold. Mm-hmm. And so I generally always wear yellow gold. Nowadays, I actually do have some white gold things because I like the graphic nature of them. Mm-hmm. And funny enough, I had someone from the Middle East who's works in the jewelry industry, and he was telling me how currently women in the Middle East do not like gold. They prefer, if it comes with gems, to do white gold, but they don't like a lot of gold. And I think it's a generational thing, because the past generation, maybe in the 80s, they wore a lot of gold. It was all about gold and value, and the weight of gold was considered value, that the next generation, again, likes the opposite. They find that looks a bit tacky and vulgar and being unsettled. And so they want to wear, less gold and more just about color and stones and more subtle. And I think really, this kind of taste comes in waves. And I think really you should wear what you like best, what you think works with
at any moment. I'm just going to, if anybody has questions, you could either use the chat box, or raise your hand, or if you want to ask Cora anything. But in the meantime, waiting for those, I was wondering, Cora, what is your next collection going to be about? What your next theme? Have you decided what's your attraction for the moment?
Like I said at the beginning, I like shape and color. It's not really official yet, but the name of the collection is called Pottering Around. Uh-huh. And for those who are not very English, who don't know what the term means, pottering around means doing things kind of around the house, but you're kind of being busy the whole time moving around, but actually you've done very little. Mm-hmm. Pottering around is kind of being busy but doing very little. And then during lockdown, I did a lot of gardening, and I did a lot in pots, and I repotted one thing from another pot and moved things around from one pot. And at the end of a few hours, I looked around and it said, my husband's not going to see that I've done anything. And I realized that this term pottering around really comes literally from moving things from one pot to another. And I'm not going to say much more than that. And you can all guess what the collection is going to be about, because it's going to take another couple of months with delays because of not being able to travel. And so
we have a comment for Fatima's asking you, is Persian jewelry has influenced you?
That's a good question. You know what?
Very good question, I have to say.
I don't, there isn't that much ancient Persian jewelry that I love ancient jewelry, and probably more than anything else, but it has not influenced me in many ways. And then I did have actually been to Tehran and see the ground jewels, where they still have piles of gems that are waiting to be used, but they very much like the Harry Winston and the modern jewelers to make their jewels. One of the things that, of course, Iran is famous for is turquoise. And actually, I used to not really like blue, partly because I thought it made me being very pale. I wasn't very fond of it, but actually I've come to really like turquoise more and more. I've made a great blue necklace using turquoise, which I actually kept for myself. So
we have a comment from Venetia that she has sent a link to everybody concerning the exhibition that's at the Whitney, and it's all about nature and spirit. It's about this artist called Agnes Pelton, who died in 1961, and a visionary symbolist who depicted the spiritual reality she experienced in moments of meditative stillness. So she suggests that we have a look. There's a link, and that you have a link, Cora, about it, because she thought of you. I think we have 2 or 3 guests that have joined late, because apparently there's a huge traffic jam outside, because everybody's running out of London to go to the country. So maybe I would suggest, and then we have another 5 minutes, maybe I would suggest if we could go, if you could put your presentation in slides so that we can have a look. Yes, over of your fantastic collections and your fantastic presentation. Actually, that was.
Oh yes, just a small recap. Me as the jeweler, and then I did lots of research about color. What is color? Why ask me about color? I love this monkey. I thought this monkey was just too great, and I have trousers today on actually the same color.
Oh, nice.
And a gray sweater and a bit of orange is absolutely my kind of thing. I think the way he's dressed is amazing. And then it's just the world I grew up in, artists from the 80s, even though these paintings of Julian Schnabel are actually quite recent, but I think that color use and his color use can be quite fantastic. I thought these paintings would work well. And this is some of the art that I was in contact with in my childhood.
And even Joseph Albers?
No, I didn't know him personally, but I remember I looked at auction catalogs and these pieces, I thought, why is there another one of these? He did another one. I mean, like, this guy, this is all he did. I mean, of course he did more works, but I was thinking, again, another one. And of course it takes you a bit of time to
understand. Yeah.
To understand, but it is one of the things that I saw a lot of.
Mm-hmm.
And this is my dad and some of the artists of the world I grew up in. Some black and white photos of a very colorful world and very colorful artists. Mm-hmm. And the reconstruction of my bedroom as a child, where I could, make my artwork turn pink by turning on the Beverly sideboard light. I can remember also my teenage sisters and mom watching Miami Vice and me not being able to fall asleep or the TV on the other side of the wall. The things you remember as a child. And then some photos of my house today. Again, design and, you know, a lot of color. But it's.
Are you still surrounded by artists today? Yes, you still.
Yeah, I had lunch. I had a birthday lunch with my friend Kate, who's an artist. So
yes,
I guess, and that's another thing is a lot of my best friends are all creatives, artists, and I guess maybe I'm just attracted to them too. People that also like color and
yeah.
But they're quite diverse. I like a lot of literary people and a whole diverse type of people. But of course, the people that understand your world and think the way you do are the people you're going to gravitate probably towards, that you know, get the way you think.
Yeah.
And again, here about the design and shape is very important to me beyond just color.
Yes, also another question I wanted to ask for you for a long time is, did you like cooking, Cora?
Yes, I like cooking.
You like cooking, yeah.
I like cooking.
But not only cakes.
Not only cakes, I like to cook too, but baking, yes, I like baking and cooking, and I've realized I've done a lot of baking with bread, and I've realized that baking with yeast is more like cooking than it is like baking. Yeah, no, I baked a cake this morning. And I almost added it to my presentation because it's a cake on a pink plate with a purple doily, and but I'll post it on Instagram. You can see that my life it never ends. And here's some of the technical sides of the talk. Again, the idea that the prime colors, the main, the colors that when you break up light, the colors that it comes into, and versus paints and pigments, and how those are built up are quite different. And if you look at them, if you overlap the can and the yellow, you get green, and the secondary colors of one are the primary of the other, and vice versa. I think it's fascinating how our perception of color when it comes to a solid object versus light is so different. And again, here about tonality, and how the rods in our eyes are all about perception of tones, is very important. And the subtlety, you know, to pick up the subtleties of these different colors is something that has got to do with the rods in our eyes versus light, and our perception of brightness and colors and light with these sky spaces are got to do with the cones in our eyes. And then again, our gemstones being our earliest source of probably places that humans could collect color. Then I talk about pleochromism, that you in certain gemstones, if you look at them at different angles, you get different colors. And so the way you cut gemstones, and you can actually play with this multicolored, this aspect, so that tourmalines and sapphires, as well as tanzanites, exhibit this pleochroism and this kind of more dynamic color, which you see multiple colors at the same time. And then my love of brown, because it's so rich and is so diverse, and versus orange, which is a bit happier and more a feminine version of red, which I really like. Yellow is the color that I'm wearing, that as a child was always my favorite color, and is the color of gold. And so, of course, all the colors that I combine, I generally combine with gold. Of course, sometimes it's rose or white. Versus red being this very strong color, and actually makes our blood pressure raise. It's very different the way we perceive red in the East versus West.
Well, apparently in the Middle Ages, women were getting married in red.
Yes, and they still do in India and China.
In India and China.
And you see, I think this is where it's a very puritanical thing that women get married in white. I think it's a very puritanical idea, the same way that cars were black and objects didn't have color, is a very Western puritanical phase. And it has not always been that, but I think we're at the, we're still lagging. We still have these remnants of this our grandparents, this idea that color was a bit exuberant and not elegant and puritanical enough, I think is a.
Mm-hmm.
Then here I talk a bit about how rubies and pink sapphires are very similar in color and in history, even in the past 100, not less than 100 years, which is which, what is a pink sapphire, what is a ruby, which are chemically the same. They're exactly chemically the same element. Just we have the name ruby is older than we have sapphires. People didn't always know that they were exactly the same gemstone. But really it's where you draw the line when a stone is too light to be called a pink sapphire versus a ruby, where you draw the line has shifted in the past 100 years. And still in the antique market to the new stone market, the line of where it is different. So the antique dealers have a different perception of what is a ruby versus the dealers that sell an unfaceted stone today. And then blue, the color that people like the most, calm and relaxing, a color that I've liked more and more recently. Maybe because it works so well with brown.
That's true.
And purple, which is this combination of red and blue, quite an intense color, royalty, and yet today it's probably has lost a lot of its chicness. And green, the most diverse color, the color I like the most, and probably sell the best, and I like, I find the easiest to work with, and it's one of the colors I really like the most. Although I like brown, I do really like green, and I wear a lot of green. And then that's me and my colorful family.
Yeah, that's fabulous. So no, we had a very pleasant talk. Thank you so much, Cora. It was fantastic to discover as the history of your jewelry and your influences through color, and that was a fantastic talk. Thank you so much. So we have to learn a lesson out of it, is that we all need to get out of the black, which is the way we refuge ourselves, and we lock down ourselves into black and get into a color with jewelry and furniture and design, and be more open to this.
I think you'll feel more positive wearing color than black.
Yeah, we have to try the yellow.
One thing I can recommend is wearing all black and then having a fabulous jewelry. You can just have the jewelry highlight. So that's also a possibility. So there are a lot of jewelry designers that only wear black because it can highlight the jewelry so much. But
that's true as well. That's true as well. So we have lots of thanks in the chat box, and so it's been a very pleasant moment, and we wish you all the best, and to to keep joyful and colorful for the next month at least.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Cora. Thank you. Bye-bye.